You know there comes a moment in every person's life when they finally decide that their worth is non-negotiable. Not because they became tougher, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally learned to honor themselves. Awakened women understand this better than most. They are not defined by what happened to them. They are defined by what they refuse to allow ever again. You see, boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. They're the simple, courageous act of saying, "This is who I am and this is what I will no longer accept." And when a woman awakens to her own value, truly awakens, she rises with a strength that is calm, not loud, grounded, not aggressive, powerful, not forceful. Today, I want to explore something essential to 7 boundaries awakened women never let anyone cross again. Not because they are protecting themselves from the world, but because they are protecting the best in themselves for the world. Awakened women don't set boundaries to keep people out. They set them to keep their values intact. And when you understand this, the entire meaning of boundaries shifts. Because it's easy to misinterpret boundaries as defense mechanisms, as barriers built from fear or from past wounds. But for awakened women, boundaries are not about exclusion. They are about intention. They are about choosing what aligns with who they are becoming, rather than who the world once told them to be. An awakened woman learns, sometimes through heartbreak, sometimes through years of people-pleasing, sometimes through a quiet moment of exhaustion, that her energy is not infinite. And once she realizes this, she starts guarding that energy the same way people guard their most valuable assets, with clarity, with conviction, and with compassion for herself. She discovers that her values are not just beliefs written on paper. They are the compass that guides her life. They tell her how she deserves to be treated. They tell her what she will stand for. And even more powerfully, they tell her what she will not stand for anymore. She starts to understand that every time she allows someone to cross a boundary, she is not only giving away time or attention, she is giving away a piece of herself. She is compromising her peace, her purpose, her direction, and awakened women simply cannot afford to do that anymore. There's a moment when she realizes that boundaries are an act of alignment, not anger. She is not pushing people out of her life in judgment. She is simply pulling herself closer to the life that matches her truth. She is creating space for relationships that strengthen her rather than drain her. She is building an environment where her values are honored without negotiation. And when a woman reaches this state of clarity, something profound happens. The world around her adjusts. Some people will resist her boundaries because they benefited from her lack of them. Some will accuse her of changing, becoming distant, becoming cold. But she understands that this is simply the discomfort of people who were never used to seeing her honor herself. She doesn't set boundaries to hurt anyone. She sets them because she finally recognizes the cost of not having them. Awakened women understand that boundaries are not rules for other people. They are standards for themselves. Instead of saying, "Don't speak to me like that," the boundary becomes, "If you speak to me like that, I won't stay in the conversation." Instead of saying, "Don't treat me poorly," the boundary becomes, "If you treat me poorly, I will remove myself." The shift is subtle but powerful. It's not about controlling others. It's about choosing herself. And choosing herself is not selfishness. It is self-respect. It is the realization that she cannot uplift others if she is depleted. She cannot love deeply if she is constantly repairing herself from carelessness. She cannot grow if her environment keeps shrinking her. So she builds boundaries not to block the world, but to create the conditions in which she can thrive. She also learns that boundaries don't need to be loud. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are often quiet. They are simple decisions made with confidence, not confrontation. They are the late-night choices to stop justifying people's behavior. They are the silent acknowledgments that certain patterns cannot continue. They are the inner promises never to abandon herself again. And once she makes those promises, she keeps them. Because awakened women know that every time they enforce a boundary, they reinforce their own worth. Every time they say no to something that misaligns, they say yes to something that matters. Every time they walk away from chaos, they walk toward clarity, and clarity becomes a form of freedom. She learns that not everyone can go where she is going, and that is okay. She learns that not every relationship will evolve with her, and that is okay. She learns that her growth may be uncomfortable for others, and that is okay too, because her evolving self is not a threat. It is a truth, and boundaries are simply the expression of that truth in daily life. When she starts protecting her values, she also starts attracting people who honor those values naturally. People who don't need reminders to be respectful. People who don't require explanations for kindness, loyalty, honesty, or consistency. People who add instead of subtract, who uplift instead of drain, who respect instead of test. Because values attract values, and when she stands firm in hers, she signals to the world the kind of energy she is available for. Awakened women don't set boundaries to close the door on others. They set boundaries to open the door for themselves. They create space for their healing, their growth, their purpose, their voice, and the more they protect what matters, the more they step into who they were always meant to become. A boundary is simply the courage to define what respect looks like instead of hoping others will guess. And this is one of the greatest shifts awakened women make in their lives. For so long, many of them moved through the world assuming that respect was universal, that kindness was obvious, that decency was common sense. They believed that people would naturally understand their limits, their feelings, their sensitivities, their needs. But as life unfolded, they learned something essential. People don't treat you based on your intentions. They treat you based on the standards you communicate and uphold. An awakened woman stops waiting for others to just know. She stops hoping that people will suddenly change or miraculously sense her discomfort or understand the weight of their own actions. Instead, she chooses clarity, she chooses honesty, she chooses to define what respect means to her in a way that is calm, grounded, and non-negotiable. She begins to understand that boundaries are not confrontations, they are conversations. They are not demands, they are declarations. They are not about creating distance, they are about creating understanding. She learns to articulate what she needs without apologizing for it. She learns that respect becomes much easier to receive when it is clearly defined. There is a moment when she realizes that ambiguity creates chaos. When she leaves her values unspoken, she risks letting others interpret them, twist them, or overlook them entirely. When she suppresses her needs out of fear of being too much, she silently teaches others that her comfort is optional. When she tolerates behavior that hurts her, she unintentionally communicates that she can endure more. And awakened women understand that clarity avoids all of this. Clarity is not harsh, clarity is kind, because clarity removes the guesswork. It allows relationships to function on a foundation of mutual understanding instead of assumptions. It allows people to show up in ways that truly support her instead of accidentally hurting her. It allows her to honor herself while also giving others the opportunity to rise to a higher standard. She discovers that defining respect does not make her demanding. It makes her self-aware. It makes her intentional with her energy. It makes her conscious of the environments she chooses and the people she trusts. She is not controlling others. She is guiding them on how to treat her in a way that honors both sides. Awakened women also learn that defining respect requires self-respect first. She cannot expect others to honor boundaries she does not honor herself. She cannot ask people to treat her gently if she constantly speaks harshly to herself. She cannot demand emotional maturity if she runs from her own. So she begins with her inner world. She begins by understanding what respect feels like, what dignity feels like, what safety feels like. Once she knows these things internally, she can communicate them externally with confidence and calm. And this communication is not always verbal. Sometimes it is shown in patterns: the way she responds when someone interrupts her peace, the way she walks away when someone crosses a line, the way she stops giving access to those who repeatedly misuse it. Her actions teach others far more than her words ever could. When she defines what respect looks like, she does it without anger. She understands that boundaries set in anger often sound like threats. Boundaries set with clarity sound like truth. She doesn't wait until she's overwhelmed to speak. She doesn't wait until she's disrespected to react. She doesn't wait until the pain is unbearable to express her needs. Instead, she speaks early. She speaks gently. She speaks with certainty. Respect begins long before conflict. Over time, she notices something powerful. Her life becomes lighter. Her relationships become healthier. Her mind becomes quieter. Because clarity removes the friction created by unspoken expectations. People no longer have to guess what she needs. She no longer has to hide her truth to keep the peace. She no longer fears disappointing others simply because she chose herself. She realizes that defining respect is an act of leadership. It sets a tone. It shows others what strength with softness looks like. It models emotional responsibility. It demonstrates what it means to honor your own humanity. And when she leads with this energy, others follow. They begin to treat her with more care. They begin to communicate more openly. They begin to understand that relationships work best when expectations are clear. Some people won't adapt, and she accepts that. Not everyone is ready for clarity. Not everyone benefits from her self-respect. But the people who matter will rise. The people who value her will listen. The people who love her will adjust. Because respect is not a test, it is an invitation. An invitation to connect more deeply, to understand more fully, to engage more intentionally. And this is the truth awakened women embrace. Respect is not something you hope for. It is something you define with courage, communicate with confidence, and protect with consistency. When a woman knows her worth, she stops negotiating with people who make her prove it. This realization does not arrive suddenly. It comes slowly through experiences that test her patience, her strength, and her sense of self. It arrives after moments where she gave too much, cared too deeply, or stayed too long in spaces that didn't honor her. It arrives after she questioned herself, doubted her value, or believed that she had to earn love, respect, or basic decency. But there comes a day when something shifts. She recognizes that her worth is not a currency to be bargained with. It is an undeniable truth that does not need anyone's approval to exist. Awakened women understand this shift intimately. They reach a point where they can no longer tolerate being around people who constantly ask them to justify themselves, people who question their feelings, people who downplay their needs, people who respond to their boundaries with resistance instead of respect, people who treat their presence as optional yet expect their loyalty as guaranteed. She sees these dynamics clearly, sometimes for the first time, and she understands that staying in them would mean shrinking herself. And awakened women no longer shrink. When she knows her worth, she becomes selective with her energy, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. She stops saying yes just to avoid disappointing others. She stops giving explanations for decisions that protect her peace. She stops apologizing for standards that ensure her emotional safety. She stops entertaining relationships where she has to audition for significance. Her worth no longer feels fragile or conditional. It becomes anchored within her, steady and unshakable. She begins to see the difference between people who genuinely value her and people who value the benefits of having her around. Some people valued her empathy but never returned it. Some valued her loyalty but took it for granted. Some valued her support but disappeared when she needed theirs. She begins to see these patterns not as reflections of her inadequacy, but as reflections of their limitations. This clarity liberates her. She stops negotiating because she realizes she never had to in the first place. And with this clarity, her relationships transform. She starts approaching connection with a new mindset. If she has to fight to be seen, it's not the right space. If she has to beg to be heard, it's not the right person. If she has to perform to be valued, it's not the right environment. Worthy relationships do not require her to prove her worth. They recognize it naturally. They meet her with reciprocity, not resistance. They show up without being asked. They care without being convinced. They respect without being reminded. Her worth becomes her filter. It guides her away from situations that drain her and towards spaces that nourish her. It helps her recognize when effort becomes self-sacrifice. It helps her understand when patience becomes self-abandonment. It helps her differentiate between genuine commitment and convenient affection. She stops excusing behavior that hurts her just because she sees potential in people. She starts choosing reality over illusion, consistency over promises, and alignment over attachment. She also realizes that knowing her worth does not mean she feels confident every moment of every day. It means she no longer allows moments of doubt to dictate her decisions. It means she trusts herself even when others do not. It means she honors her intuition even when it feels uncomfortable. It means she listens to the quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't right," even if she cannot explain why. She sees her inner signals as guidance, not overreaction. For awakened women, self-worth becomes a quiet kind of power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't seek validation. It simply stands firm. It influences how she speaks, how she walks, how she chooses, how she shows up. It becomes evident in the way she refuses to engage in conversations that demean her, the way she leaves environments that undermine her, the way she no longer tolerates emotional inconsistency. It becomes evident in the way she handles herself calm, steady, unapologetic. And when she stops negotiating her worth, people respond in two very different ways. Some step back because they cannot manipulate her anymore. Others step forward because they recognize her strength. The right people are not intimidated by her self-respect. They are inspired by it. They appreciate her clarity. They admire her integrity. They value her authenticity. They see her boundaries not as barriers, but as signs of emotional maturity. She embraces the truth that her worth is inherent. It does not rise when someone praises her or fall when someone rejects her. It does not depend on how much she gives or how little she asks for. It does not fade because someone failed to recognize it. Her worth exists because she exists, and the more deeply she understands this, the less she tolerates anything that requires her to forget it. Awakened women stop negotiating with people who make them prove their worth because they finally understand that the moment you have to prove it, the other person has already shown they cannot see it. The strongest boundary is the quiet no that protects the future she's building, not the past she survived. This kind of boundary does not come from anger. It does not come from fear. It comes from a deep, grounded understanding that every choice she makes is shaping the life that lies ahead of her. And awakened women begin to see their decisions through this lens. They stop reacting based on old wounds and start responding based on who they are becoming. Their boundaries shift from being emotional shields to intentional commitments. A quiet no is powerful because it does not need explanation. It does not need justification. It does not need permission. It lives in the calm confidence of a woman who knows that her peace, her growth, and her purpose deserve protection. For so long, she may have struggled to say no. She may have said yes out of guilt, out of habit, out of fear of disappointing others. She may have stretched herself thin to maintain relationships, to uphold expectations, to meet standards that were never her own. But an awakened woman evolves beyond this. She realizes that every yes she gives away without intention becomes a no to herself. And that imbalance becomes too costly. She learns that a quiet no doesn't always need to be spoken out loud. Sometimes it shows up in silence. It shows up when she doesn't reply to messages designed to pull her back into chaos. It shows up when she steps back from people who drain her energy instead of replenishing it. It shows up when she doesn't attend every argument she's invited to. It shows up when she refuses to participate in stories that no longer align with her identity. Her no becomes less about refusal and more about redirection, choosing where her time, heart, and attention go. When she protects the future she's building, she understands that not everyone can come with her. Some will misunderstand her distance. Some will take her silence personally. Some will label her boundaries as coldness or selfishness. But she doesn't set boundaries to please anyone. She sets them to protect the version of herself she is growing into. And this future version of her requires space. It requires clarity. It requires people who respect her presence instead of taking advantage of it. So she stands firm even when it feels uncomfortable. She also learns that the past is not a place to live from, only a place to learn from. Just because she survived something doesn't mean she needs to keep reliving it through her choices. Her boundaries shift her focus. Instead of being reactive to past pain, she becomes proactive about future peace. She chooses relationships that feel balanced, conversations that feel nourishing, environments that feel stable. Her no becomes a commitment to alignment, a promise to herself that she will not return to versions of life she had to heal from. A quiet no is also a teacher. It teaches people around her how to interact with her. It teaches them that she values her time, that she takes her emotional health seriously, that she won't tolerate disrespect disguised as affection. It teaches them that access to her is a privilege, not a guarantee, and those who value her adjust, those who do not fade. Either way, her future is protected. This boundary becomes especially important when she encounters situations that once triggered her. Where she would have once explained herself endlessly, she now chooses silence. Where she once chased closure, she now chooses distance. Where she once tried to fix everything, she now chooses to protect her peace. Her growth becomes visible in the things she no longer reacts to. Her maturity becomes visible in the things she no longer explains, and her confidence becomes visible in the things she refuses to revisit. She starts to understand that a quiet no is not resistance, it is responsibility. Responsibility for her emotional well-being, responsibility for her goals, responsibility for her healing. It keeps her anchored. It keeps her focused. It keeps her from falling back into patterns she worked so hard to break. It guides her towards environments that support her evolution rather than sabotage it. There is also a softness in this boundary. It is not aggressive. It is not combative. It is gentle but firm. It does not burn bridges unnecessarily, but it does not keep unhealthy bridges standing either. It allows her to move gracefully, intentionally, and confidently. It allows her to walk away without resentment, without bitterness, without the need to justify her choice. The quiet nah is rooted in self-awareness. And self-awareness rarely needs applause. She begins to see that the future she's building deserves protection just as much as her heart does. Her dreams deserve protection. Her energy deserves protection. Her growth deserves protection. And everything she allows into her life either supports that future or threatens it. The quiet no is how she chooses wisely. It becomes her filter, her compass, her anchor. As she grows more aligned with her purpose, this boundary becomes second nature. She no longer hesitates. She no longer feels guilty. She no longer doubts whether she is allowed to prioritize herself. She knows she is. She knows she must, because the life she is building depends on it. Every awakened woman eventually discovers that peace is not something you find. It's something you protect with clarity and consistency. Peace is not a lucky accident. It's not a gift handed to her by the right people or the right circumstances. It is a result of deliberate choices, sometimes difficult ones, sometimes painful ones, but always necessary. She realizes that peace is not passive. Peace demands action. It demands boundaries, courage, honesty, and sometimes distance. It demands that she stop waiting for life to calm down and start creating the conditions that allow her soul to breathe. She learns that protecting her peace is not a one-time decision. It's a practice, a commitment, a lifestyle. There will always be people who try to pull her into conflict that isn't hers. There will always be situations that test her patience. There will always be old patterns trying to pull her back into who she used to be. Peace doesn't survive by accident. It survives because she chooses it again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. For a long time, she may have believed that if she was kind enough, patient enough, giving enough, the world around her would mirror that energy back. But life taught her differently. She learned that not everyone values peace the way she does. Some people thrive on noise. Some thrive on drama. Some thrive on chaos because chaos distracts them from their own emptiness. And awakened women understand that they cannot control how others choose to live. They can only control what they allow into their own space. So she begins to take responsibility for her emotional environment. She pays attention to what drains her and what replenishes her. She observes how she feels after conversations, after interactions, after certain relationships. She stops forcing herself to stay connected to people who leave her feeling anxious, diminished, or unsettled. She releases the idea that she must fix everything. She lets go of the pressure to be the emotional anchor for everyone around her. She realizes that protecting her peace sometimes means disappointing others, and she learns to accept that discomfort without guilt. Her clarity becomes her shield. She becomes clear about what she needs, what she accepts, what she avoids, and what she prioritizes. This clarity allows her to move through the world with intention instead of reaction. She stops participating in arguments where the goal is not understanding but dominance. She stops giving explanations to people committed to misunderstanding her. She stops trying to earn respect in places where disrespect is normalized. Her peace becomes a standard, not a reward. Consistency is the other half of her power. It's one thing to declare boundaries. It's another to uphold them. She learns that peace is protected through consistent behavior, not emotional declarations. She cannot preach peace while entertaining chaos. She cannot ask for calm while tolerating people who bring storms. She cannot claim emotional freedom while staying tied to people who manipulate her with guilt. Peace demands alignment between her words and her actions. With consistency, she becomes a guardian of her inner world. She stops allowing access to people whose presence costs her more than it offers. She limits conversations that circle the same negativity. She reduces exposure to environments where her nervous system is constantly on alert. Her emotional well-being becomes a priority, not an afterthought. And this consistency doesn't make her rigid, it makes her whole. As she protects her peace, something profound happens. She begins to experience life differently. Her thoughts become clearer. Her reactions become calmer. Her decisions become wiser. She finds strength in stillness, not exhaustion. She begins to notice beauty in places she was once too overwhelmed to see. She learns that peace is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of grounding. It is the ability to stay connected to herself even when the world feels noisy. Peace teaches her discernment. It teaches her that not every invitation requires attendance. Not every message deserves a response. Not every conflict needs her voice. Not every relationship deserves her effort. She learns to choose her battles with wisdom. She learns to save her energy for what truly matters. She learns to say no without defending it and yes without fearing it. Peace becomes both her shield and her guide. People begin to notice the difference in her. They notice her calm. They notice her distance from drama. They notice her stability, her softness, her strength. Some will admire it. Some will resent it. Some will be inspired by it. Some will be intimidated by it. but she is no longer driven by how others react. Her peace no longer depends on being liked, accepted, or understood. It depends on being aligned. Awakened women discover that peace is a form of power. It is the quiet refusal to let the world shake them. It is the courage to walk away from anything that threatens their inner harmony. It is the understanding that the greatest battles are fought within, and the greatest victories are silent. Peace is not what she waits for. It is what she chooses again and again, with clarity, with consistency, with the unwavering belief that her soul is worth protecting.